We're following the latest out of a developing situation in Israel and Gaza. Reports say the two sides appear to have reached a ceasefire after one of the worst outbreaks of violence there in 5 years. At least 24 people were killed over the weekend. In response, President Trump said on Twitter the U.S., quote, supports Israel 100% in its defense of its citizens and issued this warning to the Gazan people: these terrorist acts against Israel will bring you nothing but more misery. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations member and Democratic presidential hopeful Senator Cory Booker weighed in on this earlier. This is part 2 of our 3-part conversation.
Support Israel's right to defend itself, full stop. You have a terrorist organization that actually suppresses its own people, conducts acts of violence and human rights violations against people who live in Gaza. And so Israel has a right to defend itself, and it should do that. But the people who live in Gaza, this is not about them. It's about the terrorist organization that is attracting such violence, that is using children, hospitals, and schools as shields for their insidious aims, which is the destruction of the state of Israel. And so we need to be mindful of not just Israel's right to secure itself, but the defense and the self-determination of Palestinian people. That terrorist organization is like a cancer undermining the security of both Gazans as well as Israelis. And so I support the defense of the state of Israel, but I also support the human rights and self-determination of Palestinian peoples. I don't think there's any conflict there. I think we need to continue to work for peace in that region and work towards a two-state solution.
So it sounds like you're in line with the president.
Well, some of the president's words, I think, are problematic to me. There's no sympathy or empathy for the struggles of Palestinians in that region. Here's an administration that is pulling back basic humanitarian support, access to clean water, to the NGOs, often led by Americans, trying to defend human rights in that region. And so I have a lot of problems with the administration's stance, but one thing people should know, from before Donald Trump, from before I was a senator, I stand with the right of the state of Israel to exist and to defend itself. And I will always be one of those people that stands up for the human rights of all people. And we need to get back to having policies that affirm that American, longstanding bipartisan American tradition in our country.
All right, another item in the news today. The president is sending the USS Abraham Lincoln to the Middle East, staying in that region to be closer to Iran, to send a message. Is that a good move?
Again, I don't know the underlying threat that they're talking about. I'll be back down in the Senate later on today to get some of the understanding of exactly what's going on in this situation. I have a real problem with the president and his policies towards Iran, pulling out of a deal with our allies. Really, we made a deal. When America makes deals, we stick by what we say. He's turned his back on that, weakening our position with critical allies we need to secure that region. He seems to be ceding or wanting to cede territory to the Iranians, tweeting out that I'm going to pull back troops from Syria. We don't do foreign policy by tweet in America. We don't give Iran a highway through Syria to arm Hezbollah in Lebanon. I really worry that he is actually making the region less stable and giving Iran more free rein and not less. And then finally, I just worry about the war hawks from America that seem to want to go to war in a region where we've made serious mistakes in the past, as we've made in the Iraq war, going there on false pretenses. The cost to America in blood and treasure have been catastrophic, in my opinion. So I want to make sure that we are pursuing diplomacy in the region, that we are teaming up with our allies, showing strength in that region, and defending our American interests, and that's protection of the state of Israel, peace and security, human rights. And this is an administration, I believe, that's making that region less stable. With our policies towards Yemen, which you saw in a bipartisan way, we rebuked the president in what he's doing with Saudi Arabia. So there's a lot of things that I have problems with. I need to understand the specifics of this most recent incident, but this is a president I think that we really all should be concerned about his foreign policy, the lack of strategy, and the instability that's been created in that region as a result.
So you talk about the fact that the United States and the Middle East, the issues that we face there are lingering still today. Switching to Latin America, the Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido, who has declared himself president of the country, the U.S. has supported his presidency. He's thinking about asking the U.S. to launch a military intervention in Venezuela. Given the history that the United States has in that region back in the 70s and the 80s, Do you see that as a viable way for the U.S. to proceed, given the turmoil in that country?
I am not a person that believes we should be sending in military. We should be extending military operations into that country right now. No. We should be working with our allies. Number one, in fighting. I think Juan Guaido is right in terms of the current leader is illegitimate. The people of that country deserve a democracy, a legitimate democracy. We should be supporting that end. We should be supporting human rights there. There are people who are struggling with just meeting their basic needs now, getting access to food and clean water. We should be working in tangent with our allies in that region to achieve those goals and those aims. Again, sounding the horn of war at this point is not the solution to this crisis.